Today, we're going to be talking about the Moondrop Aria 2. I mean, this is just a sleeve of the thing because, the box is already open. But, point is, there's a second Moondrop Aria to replace the Moondrop Aria, or at least stand beside it. And we're going to see if it's better or worse than the first one for gaming. So, let's talk about it. If you don't remember, this is the Moondrop Aria. And this is the Moondrop Aria 2, or at least the box first, because, I gotta crack this thing open. But as you can tell, waifu, very, very important. Anyway, we gotta get inside the box. Now what you get with the Aria 2 is basically the same as the Aria 1, but better quality. So here are, the earbuds themselves. Of course, you also get a carrying case, which contains a nicer cable than the Aria, as well as a 4.4mm cable, cable adapter you can, plug in, as well as some ear tips, and, of course, as usual, paperwork. Now first, I just wanted to talk about how the accessories box and the case for it in general is just so much nicer than the original one for the first Moondrop Aria. The first one just kind of picked up a random one. Oh, this is a random set of earbuds I have in here. This is not the Aria, but anyway, this is this case you can just kind of find similar ones on Amazon without the Moondrop logo. It's a whatever case, but they definitely took it up a notch with the Aria 2. So I do like this. I don't know if it's real leather, but it is much nicer. So. Good stuff. But anyway, moving on, the cable. This cable is a really, really nice cable, especially compared to the Moondrop Aria 1, which had a cable that wasn't too great. It tended to kink and tangle, and I actually don't have it anymore because it just wasn't doing it. It got too many kinks in it due to the twisting because it had a very clothy coating. This one takes a more standard approach with the rubber coating. It feels really, really thick, and you can feel some weight to it. The braiding is really nice, just being very neat and thick and dense. It just doesn't tangle easily, which is great. Metal hardware for the most part. Got that 3.5mm jack, which can be changed out, so you can actually unscrew it off and just unplug it from here. But this connection is very sturdy in case you don't want to use the 3.5mm jack, and you can change it essentially to the 4.4mm jack, which most people won't really use unless you're an audiophile. So if you're an audiophile, that's probably great for you, but if you're a regular person, you're probably going to be sticking to this jack. So good to know you can change it just in case you decide to get converted to audiophile lands and have audiophile equipment that only use 4.4mm jacks. Anyway, moving on, if we go up the cable, of course, you have the splitter, which is small, compact, does its job. That's good. Well, now what doesn't do such a great job, though, surprisingly, despite these cable upgrades, is the chin slider. It is a plastic slider, unlike the rest of it, which is metal here at the splitter. It's a plastic slider. It's not the greatest. Could be a little bit more snug. It is very loose, and sometimes I'm afraid it'll undo itself, but so far in testings as I've done, it seems to stay in place well enough. Anyway, something I will say that I do like is how the cabling is still very thick and braided even after the split, which could add to the weight, which some people may not like, but it does feel sturdy, and I do like that. And of course, it ends in ear hooks and metal hardware with the 2-pin connectors, as you would expect. Now, as for the IEMs themselves, the Aria 2s don't look too far off from the Aria 1s, and this is pretty common with Moondrop using very similar designs, but there are some key differences here that are actually also seen in the visuals. Now, while they essentially will have the same shape, at least from the exterior here, from the outside plate, you will notice there's a little bit of venting on the Aria 2s, and this is probably going to affect the sound and the bass especially. This is also seen in the back, where there is more venting, probably also for the bass, and while the shape looks very similar on the shell, and the shell is also a very nice high quality metal, there are some slight differences in shape. I almost dropped it. For example, you'll notice they are a little bit bigger than the Aria ones, so this is probably to essentially give it a larger chamber to work with, as well as possibly fitting more hardware on the inside. The nozzles are also noticeably different, and it's not just visuals and material, but on the Aria 1s they're just kind of in place. With the Aria 2s, oh look, a grill. Anyway, on the Aria 2s, you can screw them off, so you can change it out, it looks like. So there is that, just as an interesting thing in case you ever want to run it like that, or just to change out the nozzles because they get gunky or something like that. And some people may or may not care about that, but for me, I do think that's a nice touch, because with the Aria 1s, if your grill got gunked up, you had to remove it using some tweezers, and that was kind of annoying. This kind of just pop that out, use tweezers, punch it out, stick in the new one, screw it back on. I think it's a lot easier. So design-wise, I like how the Aria 2 went about things. But overall, I'd say it's not too far off physically in terms of its material and build, so that's great. But for the small technical things, I do think those improvements should show in the sound, which we'll give a listen to in a little bit. But first, let's talk about comfort and fit. All right, now before comfort and fit, I forgot to mention something I did notice is that these cables don't just slide in like on most IEMs. They actually will slide in, and you notice there's some resistance, and it's because they will actually click in. Let's give a listen to that. Let me bring that mic close, actually, so you can just kind of like that. Not the best click, but it snaps in for a secure fit. which is not unlike the other types of cables, the MMCX cables, but just something interesting I noticed. But anyway, back to fit. All right, now to the surprise of basically no one, the fit isn't too far off from the Aria 1, so that's good. They feel pretty comfortable in the ears. They don't look too much different in the ears, not sticking out all crazily enough or anything. So that's good. They lay relatively flush, much like the Aria, despite their slightly larger size. And they honestly, I did go back and forth between them to see if that felt a little bit bigger. Honestly, it really didn't. At first I did, but it was just because the ear tips were sitting differently, and I just set them properly, and then they just kind of felt the same in my ears, which is good because that means I can use these for a very long time, despite the extra weight from like the cable. I think most people are going to be okay. In my experience, I've used them a little bit earlier. I guess a whole week or two I've been using them, but point is, I've been using them for a while and they've been perfectly comfortable in my ears. Not much problem. I use them for several hours on end, and my ears didn't get sore personally, but that's also dependent on what ear tips you're using, because on a larger set of ear tips I did use, my ears did get a little bit sore after like several hours. It was about 2 to 3 hours before they started getting sore, but using like the proper size ear tips, I went down a size and I was just fine. Just make sure to also have a proper seal so you don't lose out on sound quality, which we'll get to right now. Alright, now I'm not going to get too much into like the hardware and the driver technology that's now like new in the Aria 2, because most of you guys don't care about that if you're watching my channel. You just kind of care about if they sound good and if they're going to do well in games. And point is, they sound good and they do well in games, obviously, because the Aria 1 did that. But are they better or worse? Why do they sound different? What is the sound that's different? Well, I will tell you that while these two actually do sound similar, as expected being an Aria 2, there are some noticeable differences between them. For starters, on the Aria 2, the bass is more punchy than it is rumbly, with like an okay region to sub-bass region. On the original Arias, there's a lot more sub-bass presence and a pretty okay punch, whereas it's kind of like the opposite situation with the Aria 2s, where there's less of a sub-bass presence, but still sub-bass, but more of a like mid-bass presence, so more of a punchy feeling bass. And this also then goes into the mids, where the lower mids seem to be more present, and well, I mean the mids in general seem to be more present as a whole, but there's more mids, or like more lower mid presence in the Aria 2s, so then we're gonna have more weight in the mids, which I do like, and the rest of the mids being more forward than on the Aria 1s, as well as on the highs. The highs are also more forward on the Aria 2s, so that means we're also going to get more clarity and details, and it's definitely more present, and it sounds really good. It's very clean, it's forward, it's crispier. So it's like the Aria 2s are like a crispier Aria 1, and honestly they do sound kind of like the Moondrop Kato, like strangely very close to the Katos, but Katos are a little bit different. So that's kind of an interesting thing I've noticed. So these are more like a Moondrop Kato thing with a sprinkle of Aria in terms of like how the sound goes. Of course, with that being said, that makes the sound quality of these guys also very much worth it, because the sound quality of these guys is really up there, and it's definitely starting to encroach on like the Katos territory, which is kind of interesting, because the Katos are more than double the price of the Aria 2s. The Aria 2s being like $90, so that's really good. Now, as for the soundstage and imaging of the Aria 2s compared to the Aria 1s, it's basically better in all directions. The soundstage on the Aria 2s is larger and wider than the Aria 1s, and there is a better sense of height. Not a whole much better sense of height. It's I still think as a whole, the sense of height on both is just okay, but I think it's just a wee bit better on the 2s. Now, with the 2 having a larger like soundstage and wider area to work with, one will wonder like, is there better like sound separation? And there is. It does have better sound separation and also has better imaging. It's more precise than the Aria 1s, and the Aria 1s are also they're fairly accurate, so that's really good. So just better in every single way, and this is actually really good when it comes to like competitive shooter games. With the way the Aria 2 is tuned, it just makes sense that it's better than the Aria 1 in basically all the ways it can be in like a competitive shooter situation. There's less of that sub-bass to like kind of cover up tracks of sounds, and the bass response is still there. It gives weight to the sound, giving you a sense of distance and details of what kind of surfaces the enemies could be walking on. There's a larger stage to work with, and that's great because the sound separation is utilized well, so we have good precision. Height's still just whatever, but it's still slightly better than the Aria, so that's something. But point is, tracking is really really good, and this also definitely has a lot to do with the mids and the highs just being tuned better, giving you more clarity and detail so you can hear these sounds more presently. These sounds aren't going to be like hidden in the background. They're definitely a little bit more forward, and you're able to notice them a little bit better, allowing you to be more like aware of where people are. So with that, we get the precision, you know, with all that kind of stuff. So then it just makes this a really good set of IEMs for tracking people in competitive shooter games. So, you know, that's super good. The Aria 2 is kind of like the IEM you would get if you got the Aria 1s and used them for competitive shooters, but wish the tuning was slightly different so that it would be better for like competitive shooters. And, you know, that's what you got. Now, you would wonder, does that mean it's not as good compared to the Aria 1s for, like, non-competitive shooter games and, like, more open-world kind of games? It really depends. I think it will depend on your taste in sound, whether you like more sub-bass or more punch and more of those details. But personally, I believe that the Aria 2s are better for non-competitive shooters and open world games because while they're equally, you know, immersive, they do it in different ways. And I think the added details and clarity that you get from the Aria 2s plus the larger stage just makes it feel better and more immersive. There's more of that like immersion that you get. Whereas with the Aria 1s, you'll still get that immersion, but it's a more of a relaxed experience, which some of you guys may prefer. So whether or not it's better for non-competitive games is kind of really up to you. If you really want to be engaged in that open world, I just think the Aria 2s are better. But even if like you want to be more relaxed, I'd still lean towards the Aria 2s because I just like the way they sound in comparison. But, you know, I can imagine like people who really just want to chillax and not have things like be really tickling their ears as much. I mean, you know, you'd probably go for the Aria 1s. But for me, and honestly most people out there, I think most of you guys would gravitate towards the Aria 2s. They're just crispier at the price of a little bit of sub-bass, which is probably why my main set is the Moondrop Variations. You get a little bit of both of that, but, you know, we're not going to talk about those because they're significantly more expensive and don't really belong in this equation between these two guys. If anything, it's like these things would be more compared to like the Katos, which is kind of funny because like Moondrop makes both of these IEMs, and with the Moondrop like Aria 2s encroaching on the Kato's territory a little bit, it's kind of strange to see it kind of like almost cannibalize itself, but that's kind of something Moondrop tends to do. They'll make products that are a lot cheaper, but, you know, only ever so slightly not as good as their more expensive option. It's weird. Moondrop just does this. It's like their thing if you know about them. The sound is very, very close to the Kato, to the point where if you were to get the Aria 2s and upgrade to the Kato, the upgrade in sound is very minimal. So for a lot of you guys out there who don't want to spend that pretty penny for the Katos, but like the idea of what the Katos provide, then you should get the Moondrop Aria 2s. I think you're going to be really happy with it. And that then also brings us to the question, are these better than the Aria 1s for gaming? Overall, yes. If you haven't been watching the rest of the video, it just kind of makes a lot of sense. These are just more crispier than the Aria 1s. The sound quality, I think, is generally overall much better. Yeah, you lose a bit of the sub bass that the Aria 1s had, but because of that, we're getting just better, like, mid bass. We have better presence in the mids and the highs. We have better like weight in the mids. We have a larger soundstage that is noticeably larger, and it's just overall just a really good upgrade, and it's basically kind of like the upgrade level of a Kato almost. So yeah, you can't afford the Kato, but you kind of want a Kato, but you're okay with like taking a few hits here and there that aren't too significant. It's very incremental. Moondrop Aria 2, it just makes sense. It's a really good set. I'm very surprised. Good job, Moondrop. And I don't know what you're doing with your whole lineup. Maybe you guys will discontinue the Kato and make something better than the Kato to replace the Kato, because at this point, this is kind of ridiculous. So I'm just kind of rambling at this point. So that being said, that's all I have for today. If you want to buy these guys, I have a link in the description. It's an affiliate link. It gives me a kickback, keeps me alive for the most part. But yeah, YouTube money's not great, so you know, gotta make money somehow. So yeah, that's it. I'm tired. Good night, guys. See you next time.